audio snapshots from the French Cider Tour of 2022. Hello, my name is Ria Windcaller, and I am the producer and cider MC at this weekly podcast, where we speak to makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks within the cider trade from around the world. And this week on Cider Chat, you have a front row seat on this tour as I play different audio clips that I recorded while we were touring about both Normandy and Brittany, France. So get your glasses ready. We'll be heading to that shortly. But first, a wee bit of news from out and about in Ciderville. While I was out in Normandy and Brittany, just north of Paris in France, the team at Fermentis were all meeting for a 3-day event celebrating a new state-of-the-art facility. Now, Fermentis is an international company. What they do is they offer yeast solutions for fermenters. Specifically for cider, there are 4 different what they call SAF cider options for fermenting your cider. If you want to hear all about it, I highly recommend to go back a few episodes to episode 336 with Anne Flesh, where we discuss 4 cider yeast options for cider makers. We also go over listener questions that have been piling up, and it was just an amazing conversation. I'm going to have a link in the show notes, or you could just Google Cider Chat 336 Fermentis, and I am sure it will come up on your search engine. How cool is it that they have just built this new state-of-the-art facility up in France? I really do hope to get to visit it. Maybe it'll be part of a tour at some day. The next French Cider Tour is going to be going out in 2024. So if you want to get in on that tour now, you want to be sending an email to info@ciderchat. And, if you're interested in that Fermentis tour, maybe that could be a little add-on that we could kick in there too. A lot of good stuff happening. The future is looking bright on so many different levels. 1 for cider, 2 for making the right solutions for makers with teams like Fermentis. And also a big tip to Glass to Fermentis for being a sponsor of Cider Chat. That tells you a lot about where their heart is and what they believe in, helping me bring these amazing conversations to you from all over the world. Again, if you want to check it out, just go to fermentis.com. One of the wiggy things that happens to me whenever I travel to Europe is I kind of call it the gremlin factor. It's like little things, kind of like weird things start happening. For instance, I was out the whole time the week before getting ready, prepping, meeting makers, getting ready for the travelers who were going to arrive at the French Cider Tour. And then I come back to Paris to meet everybody for the first day, and everything goes kapooty on my computer and my phone. I didn't know what was happening. All of a sudden, Google wouldn't let me go on any of the search engines. I was getting a 403 error code, which is something that you did not want to get, believe me. Or maybe it was a 404. I can't remember. It was a nightmare. And I had to get a new SIMS card for my phone. Even putting my SIMS card in from the U.S. wasn't working so well. And plus, when you do that, they really curtail how much data you could use. And I was also having difficulty checking in online. So it was a little bit of madness. But, typically, when that happens and you're in Paris, you just go out and you have a little espresso, then you have a little bit of cider, you have a little bit of cheese, and you start laughing with the people that you're with, and all your cares kind of go away. And they did. Eventually, I got everything working, but honestly, it took me a couple days, which was not great. So I wasn't able to kind of check in what was going on. And now I'm fully home and I'm looking online. And one of the things that I'm fully doing now that I am home is working on Cider Days 2.0, which is coming up the first weekend of November. And there is just an amazing amount of things going on for that. I'm so proud of all the events that are going to be taking place as part of 2.0. I know a lot of the regional makers are setting up things in the orchards. There's a lot of happiness in the air knowing that we could offer that once again and get the apple tree and apple grinders going, if you will. Not that they ever stop, but it's nice when there's more people around. And because we're kind of on the flip side, at least it feels like with the pandemic, yes, we are coming together again. And I just looked, I'm actually looking online right now at the tickets for the Calvados and American Apple Brandy tasting. Those are going. The Orchard Care for Homeowners with John Bunker. That's all about learning how to help your apple trees at home produce fruit, which is a classic problem for a lot of people. And this is a great way to help those apple trees stay in your yard and keep on producing for years to come, is to go to this talk with John. He's just phenomenal. He's on heirloom apple himself, if a person could be an apple. And he's going to be giving a talk on Saturday morning. Tickets are going for that now. The history of Applejack with Lisa Lair Dunn is just going to be phenomenal. She's going to have 3 different brandies to taste, all while we're talking about Applejack and the history of it from someone in the family who started that in the US of A. I mean, there's other people who started too, but those families aren't around at the same capacity that Lairs and Company is. They've been doing it since 1698. Back then they were using crab apples, and now they've kind of changed it up a bit. You're going to hear all about that. In fact, you can listen to 2 episodes with Lisa Lairs Dunn on Cider Chat. I'm going to have a link in the show notes. But here, she's going to be at Cider Days 2.0. We're pouring her brandy at the Calvados and American Apple Brandy tasting. And we also have 2 other American Apple brandies. We have Beaver Pond Distillery, which is one that was just added. So not only did you have 6 different brandies to taste, because there's 4 Calvados, there's now 3 American Apple brandies. And the third one is from Flag Hill Winery and Distillery up in New Hampshire. Just did an episode with them. There's a lot to catch up if you haven't been listening. If you're queuing in now, you're in the right place. Don't worry about it. So that's going to be taking place on Saturday morning, because what better way than to start drinking on Saturday morning at Cider Days 2.0 than with this 9th generation Lairs family member. Oy, 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 that's incredible. Later on in the day, she's going to be signing bottles at Ryan and Casey's, which is right down the street. They have a big in-store tasting because they're going to have a lot of cider for sale that you could grab to go, and she'll be signing bottles. That's like a collector's piece, no doubt. Then on Saturday afternoon, it's going to be the cider pop-up. We have author talks. Claude Jacquelaire is going to be there talking about Cider Planet. We're going to have Matt Kaminsky talking about his new book. We're going to have James Asbel of Ciders of Spain doing a talk on Spanish ciders and doing a tasting. Then down below, we're going to have some music by John Hughes. Check that out. That's going to make me happy. We're going to also have vendors, some tasting, and then that evening, it's a cider dinner, and I see tickets are going out the door for that. You don't want to wait to the last minute because, well, I can't wait to the last minute. We have a caterer. Aunt Kathy is coming with all her amazing food. We have a 5-course dinner, all gluten-free, and we have 6 women producers at that cider dinner. 6 women producers. I mean, just pause on that for a moment. 1 being Lisa Lairs Dunn, 2 being Judith Maloney of West County Cider, Eleanor Leger of Eden Specialty Cider, Louisa Spencer of Farnham Hill, Nicole Bloom of Carr Cider, and Anne Garwood Hamp of Ragged Hill Cider. I think that's 6. Did I miss somebody? There's so many, I can't even believe it. And that cider dinner isn't just like a cider dinner where you just kind of go. I mean, that's not the way I roll. I'm going to be the MC at that dinner. We're going to be having some fun. And there's going to be dignitaries in the audience too. So, woo, what a way to kind of like kick into the fall and just get happy for stuff. So that's what I am full on now, getting ready for that. It's just, oh man, what a fall. What a wonderful fall. If you want to find out about Cider Days 2.0, go to Cider Chat, because Cider Chat is the main sponsor for this event. We have a number of sponsors that I will be talking about in the upcoming episode going to Cider Days 2.0. I think that goes live on August 19th. But the links to everything is at ciderchat.com. Just go to the main page or just Google Cider Days 2.0 and it'll bring you to Cider Chat. There's an About page, a schedule page, and a place for you to get your tickets. You do not want to miss out. This is an extraordinary event. There's a lot happening the week before, going up to Scott's Farm. There's things up there happening. They have an amazing cacophony of different varieties. They're going to have tastings starting now, every weekend going forward. A lot of buzz in the air, a lot of happiness. Join in the fun. come along to Cider Days 2.0. I really want to see you there. Spread the word, pass it around. This is all about cider going up. Coming into this episode, you heard these ringing bells, and they are ringing in the harbor side village of Honfleur. I can't say it's totally a village because it's pretty bustling and absolutely picturesque. This is a place that Impressionist paintings would go to paint in the light at Honfleur. It is a destination. It's about 2.5 hours from Paris. Earlier in the day, we had stopped at a little bakery, picked up our lunch, bought some cheese, and went to a little garden right off the Route du Cider in Pays d'Auge, which is a region in Normandy on the route to cider. And then we headed out to Honfleur that evening, stayed in this beautiful old world hotel. Everybody loved it. And that evening we had a cider dinner and a very special guest by the name of Agathe Letellier. She was there with us that evening. We had an amazing talk about the trademarking of Pommeau, and everyone there got a good little education that indeed, and this is coming from somebody who worked at that high top level in France for appellation control, that Pommeau is a trademark name that should only be used by French makers, which encourages all of us out here in America and around the world to find our own beautiful name. I have to follow up on this. I don't want to belabor it, but it was an amazing conversation. It was an amazing dinner with Agathe, to have her just there laughing. Wonderful. So the first clip that we're going to have is a little clip from Agathe. We went to see her the next day, had a classic Norman buffet at her cidery called Manoir de Montreuil, which sadly had a major fire in 2019, where she lost a large barn that had all her fermenting equipment. Luckily, it didn't hit the Calvados cave. So it's kind of a new facility in many ways, intertwined with the old, and we're going to be hearing a little bit about the beginnings of Manoir de Montreuil. I do have a link in the show notes to the full episode I recorded with Agathe a couple of years ago, which I highly recommend if you want to hear more from this amazing woman in cider in France.
25 years ago, my mother asked me, "Do you want to take it off over?" Mm-hmm. And I say, "Okay." Wow. And so I specialize. So I make evolution, because it was a big farm, but with too many things for me, I think, because you don't do well when it's too many things. So I specialize all in production of apple and pear, and so after I made juices, more ciders, Calvados, more Calvados, and Pommeau. Wasn't Pommeau before. Yeah. And vinegar cider, all different products from the apple. And we replanted a lot of apple trees also. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm.
How much do you produce a year?
So it's I produce in cider 55,000
bottles.
Bottles. Yeah, bottles. Okay. Yeah, 55,000 bottles. In Calvados, I distill between 100 hectoliters to 500 hectoliters, depends if I have a big production.
Right.
Yeah, and it's very different. The Pommeau is like 50 hectoliters, 50,000 hectoliters.
50,000.
Yeah, like it's... Yeah, for the Calvados, it's 100,000 or two. No, attends, wait.
Wait, that's a lot.
In English, the numbers are not so easy. 50 millilitres.
Okay, 50,000 liters.
Yeah, 50,000 liters, 50 millilitres. And the juices also, it's like 20,000 bottles. Yeah. So it's different products. Right. Mm-hmm. I'm not specialized in one, but I'm more specialized in cider, maybe, because it was the beginning. I start with the cider little by little, so to learn, because we learn making cider because it's a very lively product. So it's very very different every year.
Right.
So we have to adapt ourselves to what happened in the tanks. It's you can decide many things, but there are things you can't decide. So you have to follow the bubbles.
Can you tell us about your process of making the cider, beginning with the harvest and going through the process?
Sure.
All right, just to recap a little bit here, going back, I think it was to 1989, there were 2 large farms that the family had. And as many situations for many farmers in this part of the world and throughout the world, it's all about legacy. How do you keep something that's a family brand, a family product in the family moving forward? And it kind of fell on to Agathe's shoulders. And honest to goodness, she was the right person for it, because she is what we would say very formidable and has the eye like no other producer I've met before on how she is able to integrate a bit of a tourism aspect to her business, all while maintaining amazing products. And what she has now done there is just exquisite. Post the fire, has rebuilt, doing better than before, now has a little bit of a chamber option. It's kind of like a B&B, so you could stay there on the site. She's really close to Honfleur, and she welcomes many people in to share at that Normandy buffet, which she serves 2 tour buses like our own. But many are not cider tours. We're kind of that unique little cider bus going around, because most are going to the World War II memorials that flank the coast. In fact, that morning when we left Honfleur, I asked the driver to go along the coast just so we could see some of the bunkers, the remnants of World War II, to just put your mind there for a moment of what it was like in 1944 on those beaches of Normandy. Quite historic and a real major history for all of us worldwide. From here, we headed over to Patrice Girard's farm. He is 13th generation, and now his daughter Estelle is taking on. Patrice is retiring from maintaining the cows. They have, I forgot how many head of cows, 100 or something, and then an amazing production of Calvados. They actually export to the U.S., not necessarily under the label of Manoir de Montreuil, but you can get his Calvados in this country. I brought home some of his Pommeau, which is 20 years old. It is exquisite. And this was a pretty cool visit because we met both of them and have a tasting room. They are full-out farmers. And this time we met up at the tasting room, and he walked us through the fields, down the fields, through the orchards. We were eating different apples and pears along the way. Then we finally made it down to the cider barn, and that was an experience. So you're going to hear a little bit of that. Specifically, we're standing in the barrel room here next to these giant barrels, one dating back to 1768 or something, because the maker back then would make their mark on the barrel. And here is Patrice talking a little bit about the area in terms of World War II and some of the history of what was happening at that time.
Un avion bombardier américain est tombé sur la propriété ici.
From the Allies, has been crashed right here, nearby here. And 2 years ago, they started to make some research to excavate it. Yeah, to investigate, and they found lots of garbage,
debris, metal.
Were there bodies to be recovered?
C'était un Lancaster.
Ah, c'était un Lancaster.
Un Lancaster.
Ah, mais c'était pas
l'avion, c'était un Lancaster.
Ah, c'était un Lancaster. Je vais vous parler de Lancaster. It was a Lancaster.
A Lancaster
Bombardier
bomber.
Lancaster.
I think it's an English bomber. Yeah.
Et il avait pour mission de bombarder Caen.
He was supposed. This one was supposed to bomb Caen. So he was coming from London, straight ahead to Caen, and then he was doing like a circle around here, and he was going back to London.
Et c'était le 8 août. Et il y avait 1000 avions bombardiers. 1000.
In August 8th, there were about 1,000 Bombardier Lancaster. So they founded all the name of the soldiers who passed away, and also the affected mission, like the goal of the mission. So back to the crash. So there were 5 soldiers in it. So 2 of them escaped it with the parachute, and 3 of them just died by burning, like they get burned actually from the explosion.
Et quand on a recreusé il y a 2 ans,
as they were digging, exploring the ground, they started to smell again the kerosene.
Oh, wow. Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
And what about the barrels of Calvados? Hidden?
Il les cachait pendant la guerre ou...
Non.
2 things. No, they didn't have to hide it because he said that the Germans didn't really care about the Calvados. They were drinking more like cognac, for example. But the government started in 1942 to put an appellation on the Calvados to make sure that the Germans were not going to use this Calvados for oil, like for fuel.
Yeah.
And here is yet another example of every time I go to France, I learn something new because I've asked about Calvados before, and I know that there have been made false walls for people to hide barrels. Sometimes people buried barrels, but this is the first time I found out that the government stepped in to do some type of protection around it for what it was worth. So there you go. It just is worth to keep on going back to some places because many things that you lose in translation, you have to keep on hearing. And you're going to hear something coming up in just a little bit here with Etienne Dupont of Domaine Dupont. Because in last week's episode, it was all focused on a conversation with Etienne talking about tasting Calvados. And I asked him how long they wait when they make the cider before they start distilling it. And I heard that they do it after 3 days, but I misheard. So we're going to clear that up right now. How soon after do you make the cider does it then go into distill? So you press the juice, it starts fermenting. How many days after do you start distilling, typically?
3 weeks.
3 weeks.
We try to make it as quick as possible, but we have to make sure that there is almost no sugar left, because if you boil sugar, then you get caramel. But we don't want it to stay on its lees for ages, like some do, because we don't think there is a real benefit to it, and we think it will alter the aromas. On the contrary, we want to keep it fresh. And neat also, so no volatile, as he said, nothing that could smell a bit like vinegar, because we wouldn't want to concentrate this.
Yeah. Right.
And everything I get here smells very neat. It doesn't smell like it's coming from old cider.
And you're using a selected yeast for the cider that you ferment for the distillation?
No.
Commercial yeast, are you wild?
No.
Yeah.
It's wild yeast.
Yeah, okay.
If fermentation was too slow, we can warm cider or we can use yeast. So far we didn't.
All right, there we have it. 3 weeks after they start fermentation, and they are using a wild yeast. And Etienne is talking about that if it's a slow fermentation, they can put in some cultured yeast to get it going. And you were also hearing from the distiller. Her name is Mathilde, and she is on Instagram. I'm going to put a little link on Instagram that you could follow her. How cool is it that she went to Domaine Dupont because she was very interested in distilling rum because she loves rum. I agree. I love rum too. But here she is working with this master distiller, and you can just tell she's learning so much. And we were learning a lot there too. We began in the distillery room, and then he took us over into the barrel room and just started opening up barrel after barrel and letting us taste it. Barrels of different sizes, barrels of Calvados in different oak cask. He's doing a smaller format now to get more liquid to oak contact and trying different barrels like a cherry barrel. I mean, cool stuff going on there and very, very innovative. In fact, now Domaine Dupont has a quince cider to boot. I brought home a cider that was aged in a Calvados barrel. So exquisite. I love this place. I love this man. It was so cool to meet Mathilde and hang out for a good amount at Domaine Dupont. I mean, what's not to love about that?
Ready? 1, 2, 3.
That little recording that you just heard, I also played in the beginning of the show, Coming In with the Ringing Bells. And that was Tristan Wright of Lost Boys Cider in Virginia, Alexandria, Virginia, to be specific. And he and I were like exploring down into the cellar. It was an intact cellar. Now, I've been going to this chateau for many years. I brought other tour groups to the chateau, and I did not know that there was an intact cellar in the belly of this landscape. The chateau itself is from the 11th century, so that's a ways back there. It is kind of all ruined. You can't get into it, and when I always would approach it, we would be there during the week and couldn't get in. But it just so happened that there was some folks on site doing something, not sure what, but they welcomed us in to walk about the grounds. No safety railings, no nothing. We could just like climb up to the little towers, which we did, and also go into the cellar where you had to like squat your head down, walk down into this like open area. Evidently they do dinners down there sometime. Little musty, but the acoustics were exquisite. And so I was down there with Tristan. Then Ginger came along. Ginger's from Oak Bluff Cidery out in Washington State. And we were doing a little bit of oming down there. I'm going to play this little clip with Ginger, Tristan, and myself where we did a little bit of a oh too because the reverb is just so cool. And then we're going to be heading to hear from Frédéric Pacary. I had a little bit of a piece on Pacary a while back. You heard a couple episodes back. I'll put a link in the show notes to that. But this is all about us walking about the orchard right next to the tasting room. This is in Domfrontais, all about the pear pears, because Domfrontais is the pear region in Normandy that's just renowned. 300-year-old pears. And the Pacary family, they do a number of different products. They have cider, of course, because everybody does. They also have the poire, because this is what they are really specializing in. They have a grim poire, because their farm is called Grémont, so they call it Grim Poire, which is what they call Pommeau, because they're respecting what they do in Normandy and Brittany around Pommeau. In Domfrontais, a different region, they do not have the legal standing to use the word Pommeau, so they call it Grim Poire, and they have also amazing Calvados, including 100% pear Calvados. So we had a wonderful tour. We're out in the orchard here, standing next to like a 300-year-old tree, and I'm asking a little bit about exporting to the U.S. and some thoughts on just poire in general. Let's first go to that Ohm with Ginger and Tristan and myself.
Je pense que le développement, il est plus sur le problème de la production que sur le problème de la commercialisation.
Okay, so it's more about the issue is more about the production. They have a really limited production, so it's not really a lack of interest. So you can have like a rising interest, but there is no
only so much pears.
Et puis on a un système qui est très très naturel, c'est ce que j'expliquais tout à l'heure. Prise de mousse naturelle en bouteille, verger ou tige.
To the high stem trees and the natural poire process, industrials use the break, meaning that they don't really get into it because it's just too slow.
Okay.
Takes too long.
Yeah.
Yep. 100 years.
C'est le chat qui se mord la queue, quoi. Soit on va...
Yeah, well, in French we have this sentence saying that the dog is biting his own tail. Tail. If they want to produce more poire, they are going to lose their quality because they're going to have to be like a little bit more like intense production.
Right.
But this intense production is not possible with this type of poire.
Are there batiches being planted? Or just all? None.
Okay. So to get like this Poiré de Domfront label,
has to be high.
Starting from 2030, they won't be able to use the low stem trees.
Okay.
Wow.
2030. Okay.
Pretty soon.
Mais il y en a pour dire.
Wow.
But it's he's saying that most of the people just have the high stem. It's really unusual to have the low stem.
Low stem. Okay.
Yeah.
Two things that Frederic is mentioning here that I think is really important just for all of us to kind of, have in our back history book and also looking forward. One is that he's talking about the quality of Poiré there and that it's hard to kind of scale up. And we're always trying to figure out how are they making a living because the glass alone that they're using for each bottle of Poiré, and when I'm mentioning Poiré, in case you don't know, this is Perry pears only, 100%, not any cider apples or apples at all. It's called Poiré in France. And what he's saying there is in order to get this kind of quality, it would be hard to scale up to like a huge industrial style of making Poiré. He feels it's not going to happen. The future will tell, right, on how that happens because as demand increases, we always seem to find or make a way that was once impossible possible. The other piece is I was asking about high stem trees versus low stem, and that is like a high standard tree versus a low short tree, which I can't think of the name what it is right now in English, but I think you probably know what I'm talking about. And he's saying starting in 2030, if you're going to get the Domfrontais appellation on your Poiré, it has to be 100% standard pear trees. And these trees are tall. They shadow over any of the apple trees in the orchard, which are also standard size cider apples or cider trees too. And an interesting thing, I didn't really follow it up, but I thought this was really kind of cool to note. While we were walking about all these orchards in the fall, there were no yellow jackets out really at all. And there were apples down the ground. We were at the Musée de Poiré. There were apples and pears on the ground. No yellow jackets. And I do want to follow this up at some point, but I guess evidently that has one to do with the ecology and the health of an orchard, and that yellow jackets are found in a not so healthy orchard. This was brought to my attention by a cider maker's wife, Lisa, Spacetime Mead and Cider works in Dunmore, Pennsylvania. Dan and Lisa were both there, and Lisa had another conversation with somebody else, and evidently she was speaking about the fact that it talks about the health of the orchard and the ecology. So we will hopefully maybe follow up on that at some point and get a little bit more info because, shoot, I got a lot of yellow jackets around my house. I don't even have a lot of apple trees, and they just come out whenever there's fruit. What does that mean? So just something to put in our hat. But interesting things, these little pieces, these little pearls of cosmic wisdom that we piece along the way while talking with all these different makers. I just try to remember each year I go, I learn a little bit more, and it informs me, and it's kind of putting together this jigsaw history of cider and perry and poiré in our world. This next little clip is from the bus itself. In fact, next week's episode, part 2, you're going to be hearing some testimonials from folks on the tour. But this little clip I want to throw out to the folks down in Florida right now. We actually had 2 scenarios. We had Robert from Red Island Cider up in Prince Edward Island. And while we were in France, he was chatting with his family back in Prince Edward Island during a hurricane. And thankfully, there was a lot of damage, but the cidery itself didn't sustain as bad a damage as some folks. So our hearts and souls were going out to them. And then as we are rolling out today, we have our eyes down to Florida where there's another horrific hurricane hitting. And we had Brian Wing on the tour. Brian, the co-owner and fermenter at Green Bench Brewing Company in St. Petersburg, Florida, which is on the Gulf side of Florida. And they make not only beer, but mead and cider. And so here you're going to be able to hear what they're doing with cider in Florida. You think, okay, no apples are growing in Florida. So how do they do it? And this explains it well. And you could see Brian knows his apples, and he's just up-level his whole experience. So let's roll to this next and hear a little bit about it, and while we're also sending a little bit of love to both the Canadians who are having aftermath of the hurricane, and as this is rolling out today on September 28th, 2022, the folks down in Florida, let's hope that softer winds are meeting you.
But this is a blend of there's Cox Orange Pippin, there's some Newtown in there, there's Golden Russet and Roxbury, and then Dabinet, and I think some Wixon in there, and Wixon Crab, and then probably a few that I'm forgetting as well, because usually there's 8 or 10 varieties in this blend.
It's nice.
Well, after 3 years holding up that long too, that acidity helps kind of, it's still nice and bright, and
it's very
fresh.
Very refreshing.
But it's my favorite series.
Really well done.
Oh God, I mean, I'm a huge Roxbury Russet fan. Love Roxbury. I just die for that. Wixon crabs, Pioneer crabs, Hughes crab.
Yeah,
we do a lot of
balanced.
single varietal crab ciders because that's one of my favorite things in Florida is to do a lot of single varietal. So you come to the bar and sit down, and I can give you 6 or 8 different things and show you what each apple tastes like. Which really, in Florida, there's just like nobody out there. Yeah, right.
I mean,
nobody's doing it.
Mind.
Yeah, nobody's doing it.
But you are.
Yeah, you're right.
Really?
And so I love those varieties, and then some other odds and ends that I really like. I get Benet Rouge every other year. Generally, love that apple, and then some. I mean, I love them all. I mean, a lot of you read a book and they talk about this variety or that variety doesn't make a good single varietal. And I will make everything a single varietal just to see what it turns out to be like, and always can find something I love about it.
Yeah.
I did like a Hughes, or I did a Pioneer and Wixon crab apple, not single but 2 varieties. And you'd think that would just be like crazy acidity and but what happened is it was this amazing like lemon lime during the ferment. It was my staff's favorite cider I ever made. It was and in Florida it was bright, spritzy, amazing, refreshing. So we're really proud to be able to do that, in Florida. Way away from apple country,
and
right?
where are you located in Florida?
St. Petersburg. So that's right. That's like Tampa, St. Pete area. Yeah.
That's the East Coast.
West Coast.
Gulf
Coast. Yep.
Gulf
That's
Coast.
right. Yep. About halfway up the state, over on the left hand side. Yeah.
I'm sorry, St. Petersburg. Now I know where you're located.
No, it's all right. It's and so we're I'm fortunate to have made some good connections at CiderCon with apple growers because I can't do it
up in New York State.
Yeah, and so I get the majority from Langeter Farms in Williamson.
Okay,
if
wonderful.
You know Jake and the guys there. He's a 5th generation family farm, and then Sam from Ancho helps me out with some apples from Pennsylvania and Virginia and stuff that. So yeah, it's
you're pulling it down into the Florida coastline.
I've got a couple more too that I've got that one's a Cox Orange Pippin and Albemarle Pippin in a can that I just canned last month. So I brought that, and then we'll have that later. And then Giants in the Sky is a wild ferment, so I brought it in, pumped the juice right into a barrel, let the thing go naturally for it was in the barrel for probably a year, and then I bottled it up in bottle condition with that same, the wild yeast that was in there for another couple months or whatnot. And that was I've released that since last year or something like that. And so that one's going to be funky and dry and a lot of fun. And so it kind of gives you 2 ends of what we're doing.
Florida you just blow my mind on the Florida cider scene.
Wait.
My happiness is just overflowing.
We're just trying to serve it to get it down to the masses down there who don't have the chance to try
but want to have
amazing
good quality cider.
Yeah.
So a little bit of fusion, of New York fusion with Florida
That's right, yeah.
sunshine and Florida terroir in terms of the style of the cider maker that you are.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. And it was ridiculous. I grew up in Michigan, and then I moved to Florida and decided to make cider. It was absolutely absurd.
Let's make it really hard.
I'm a glutton for punishment.
Well, cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you. All right, I'll let you know, guys, when I'll pop another bottle or can or whatever. But thanks. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, enjoy.
Très bien indeed. Oh my goodness. Well, that was kind of like the afternoon, and I'm not sure if that's when we started singing and doing karaoke on the bus or what. The bus itself, or I should say the coach, had 2 tables in the back, facing each other, and lots of space. It was just it was epic, super epic. I can't wait to bring these little testimonials from you from next week, hearing what people's highlights were and just sharing why it's kind of nice to go on a cider tour. This one was particularly nice because we had, I think, 8 cideries initially, and then 2 more were added on to the trip. One where people could kind of walk from the garden on the first day, going down to Pierre Hout. And then I think it was on Thursday or Friday, we made a little deal with the local Perry farmer, the Perry farmer. And that is my friend Philippe and Marie Claire. I had visited Philippe a little bit earlier. If you want to see what that little visit was like the week before when I was hunting down his Calvados, which I love, you could see a little shot of us being in the barrel room where he told me that they had a 1989 barrel that his father made. It had been hiding behind a beam that had fallen down in an old barn, and they discovered it. It was the last Calvados that his father made, and we stopped and got a case of that along the way, and that was a nice addition to the collection, I'll tell you. 1989 bottle of Calvados, all dusty. Whew, man, what a tour. So that leaves this for now. I'm going to roll out of here and bid you adieu until next week when I bring back my good friends on the Cider Tour. You might be able to tell I'm a little loopy right now, still a little jet lagged, but feeling oh so fine, filled with good cheer, and looking forward to seeing you at Cider Days 2.0. Don't forget to check out those tickets. I do hope you are in the area of Western Massachusetts coming the first weekend of November, because I'll be there drinking Calvados, American apple brandy, a lot of cider, and maybe some Perry too. And with that, I leave you here. This is Rhea Windcaller signing off for now. Looking forward to seeing you in Ciderville.
We like cider, we like palms, we love orchards and having fun. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Oh yes there is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. We like cider, we like palms, we like orchards, having some fun. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. Oh yeah. We like cider. Oh yes we do. We like palms. Oh yes we do. We love orchards, having some fun. There is a reason. There is a reason why we do it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. There is a reason why we do it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. Ba-da-da-dum. We like walking down the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. Oh yeah. We like cider. Ba-da-da-dum. We like palms. Oh yes we do. We like orchards, having some fun.
Yeehaw!